Do you have a hard time letting go of this idea of quote unquote being perfect? Having things go the way that you planned and feeling fully in control of, having things work out the way that you had envisioned it. If so, this episode is for you. Breaking perfect isn't about lowering your standards or expecting less of other people, but it's really this practice of letting go of the plan, the rigidity, the thoughts you had about how something is going to work out, and seeing how the situation is and adapting to that. And for adults with immigrant parents, that is a lifelong skill, right? We always had to adapt. We had to modify our expectations. But then there's this internal battle of like, that wasn't what I had expected. It wasn't perfect. So it's so important to have this conversation about how to break perfect, whether it's in our personal life or our professional life. And for adults with immigrant parents, this idea of being perfect equates to sometimes a feeling of safety, right? Because if we're in control, if we're proactive, if we could prepare for all these things, then it'll work out and we won't have to worry as much. We don't have to deal with as much things, and that's not always the case though, unfortunately. So in this episode, I'm so excited for you to listen to all the wise wisdom and advice, suggestions, and ways that Chris had navigated being in the motion film industry that I think you will find so relatable whether or not you are interested or are in the film industry. Chris Oeurn is a camera operator and has advanced in her career into a role that Chris really enjoys, and I'm so proud of Chris and all that Chris has accomplished, and I hope that you really find this beneficial because all the tips and tools are so useful, like I said, regardless of what industry you're in and just for your personal life as well. So take a listen, let me know what you think. Welcome back to Empowered with Immigrant Parents. This is Allison, and if this is your first time listening, welcome to the show. Today we have a very special guest, and we will be talking about what it's like to break this idea of being perfect and, how to navigate different challenges as a high achiever. On the show, we have with us today Chris Oeurn, a camera operator in the motion picture industry. And we are so excited to talk about all the things that, are related to how adults with immigrant parents can really challenge themselves, check in with themselves, and see how we can grow in our professions that may be a little bit more challenging or different than other fields. So, Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, Allison. Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I want to say for everyone who is watching, Allison, I've known for so long. We grew up together and went to school together, have been through sports together, have been through a lot of things, and I'm just so proud of how far you've come as like on an individual level, but also like a personal and professional level. It's so cool that you've taken your personal experience around families and like what you've learned and you've experienced as a second generation adult and have channeled that into helping people empower themselves and really grow. Because it's already a challenge as a second generation person, but I admire you so much. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Of course. Thank you for your kind words. And yes, we've known each other for a very long time. So I also know that there's a lot of resilience. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show to share with our audience what tangible tips and tools and what you've done to navigate all the great things you have. And yeah, I can't wait to hear and have the audience hear what you have to share.
For sure, I will do my best. So, so my name's Chris. I'm a camera operator in the motion picture industry. I am second generation Cambodian Chinese American. I was mostly raised in LA by a single parent, and I put myself through college, started working as a technician in a camera rental house, and then started freelancing as a camera assistant while shooting projects on the side. And then I sort of climbed up the ladder to camera operating for film, television, documentary, music videos, live events, and more. So that's sort of my journey of how it's gone. And for those of you who don't know what a camera operator does, what it means is that I'm usually the person working with the cinematographer and the director to frame, time, and choreograph a shot to tell a story. And basically, what I tell my mom is, in layman's terms, is that I'm the one holding the camera. But basically, the role of what I do on set is that it's sort of part diplomat, part athlete, and part psychologist.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, that's a great way to tell our parents about what we do because it's so hard sometimes as adults with immigrant parents to even explain what the heck it is we're doing. I tell my parents I just talk to people and help them because that's the most common thing, like most basic thing I could say.
Yeah, for sure. Especially for them when it's like, as long as you're making an income, you're able to sort of like survive. It may not be totally understood, but I think it's um the important part for them is knowing that you are able to sustain and sort of like take care of yourself as an adult, you know? And I think that's what they worry about most. And sometimes they don't really know what the details are, but they understand an image and that says everything, right? So for me, I'll show my mom pictures or videos of me working. She's like, "Oh, that camera's so heavy." And I'm just like, "Yeah, it's sometimes it is heavy and sometimes it's having to like prove to them and prove to you like and others that like you can do it, you know. It can be kind of what's it called? Uh People from the outside looking in can have a hard time understanding it, and then I think when you start getting into it too, like you start to kind of like open that world and learn that too. But
Yeah,
anyway, as a tangent, yeah, for sure, it can be hard to kind of explain to people who understand English, and then even harder to explain to your second generation parent who's like, oh, like you can actually get paid to do this kind of work, like most of the time, yeah.
yeah, and then you get to travel. But I think going back to what you were saying about even in English, right? Because I don't work in the camera film industry, and I had a hard time, um, like grasping what it is that you do. So yeah, maybe if you could explain what you mean by, you have to be like an athlete, a psychologist, and I forget the other one that you said.
Yeah, so the diplomat part, I'll try to simplify it as much as possible because I could talk about what we do all day. But diplomat meaning there are so many moving parts that happen in a movie, right? Like there are so many departments like costume, there are props, there are lighting, there are stunts, there's the camera department, the lighting department, the grip department, the makeup department, and there's just so many different things that are happening. And for someone who's the camera operator, I'm not quite the top of the food chain per se, but I do have somewhat of a leader role. And I'm sort of like in the middle there where it's like as a diplomat, you're kind of working to cohesively. So when that happens, you want to make sure you're not stepping on anybody's toes and you're collaborative and you're helpful, or if you're making a request that like you're not demanding and all these other things. So like it's always nice to come to a place of understanding when you're asking for things from other people, like when you're working with actors and you're like um, you're asking them to move a little bit to the left or to the right, or like, hey, if you can just hang just a second longer just so I can catch you giving that person that look or something. Those are all things that cohesively, like as a diplomat, um in all the different departments, and then also like my boss, typically the DP, and with the director, sort of like taking everybody's input, everybody's idea, and then trying to get it that one or two or three times that you guys get it in the movie, right? So it's a lot of things to negotiate at once, and I
Mhm.
think um, as the person behind the camera, like pretty exclusively because the DP's off lighting and all these other things, I'm always there as the operator and I'm always seen. So, however I portray can also set the tone for how we are on set and how we sort of act and ask and negotiate for things from each other in with different departments and also like other people who are technically hired me. So,
Wow, yeah, just that one piece is like already so encompassing of
that's the
so many
diplomat
things.
part. That's
Yes.
the diplomat part. And that's part of the psychology part of like, how do you ask for things and how do you make sure you incorporate other people's ideas or like let make people think it's their idea or things like that. I mean, I'm not very good at saying how this goes, but that's part of the job. That's those two things. Diplomat, psychologist. The athlete part is when I'm carrying the camera and then have to time when certain shots have to be in certain looking at certain things or how we want it to feel between the shots or different things that we're framing. Yeah.
Yeah. And just thinking of filming and filming live and working with so many people and balancing so many things at once, it kind of is like you can't really do your job until you're on the job, and you could practice, but you can't really practice all of that at home, right? Like knowing what other people are going to do, how they're going to react. So how do you manage that? And like how do you deal with all the challenges that come up as you are working live?
I would say the beauty and the challenge of coming into this job is that because I'm often always in a different location or situation and people all the time, um, I feel like also I did get a lot of practice of like adapting to my environment, growing up with an immigrant parent, which I think it's positive and sometimes can frame the experience from a place of survival. So a lot of that times it ends up being instinctual. I can practice on a technical level at home. I go uh, train under a mentor when it's technical or if it's physically based. Those things help me to prepare for what to do in those situations. But like when it comes to people or the place and all these other things, like you kind of have to be on your toes and kind of be open. And also, you have to be ready to, I'm speaking like you, but I have to be ready to like abandon those things um, too, because it's like you have this idea of like I envision it's going to be this thing, but it's actually we're gonna scratch that. We don't have time. We don't have the light. We have to move to a different location, or we have to go inside now, and we have to reimagine this. And part
Mm.
of it is like all of the preparation and all of the letting go. And so in a way, it's like uh you can prepare and that will prepare you to do it totally different at times. It's been a positive and it's also been a tricky experience at times because sometimes I'm like, well, was this the best? And like, well, if they're happy, like that's what they're getting, right? As long as that's what they want, or like sometimes you are kind of just rolling with the punches, and I think that's part of letting go of the sticking to the plan per se, or exactly sticking to a plan of like what you come up with or what you think something is going to be, but also being adaptable. And that has been a mix of like it's a good practice of like not being perfect and coming from a place of like having to feel like you have to do the thing so you don't mess up so that you have opportunities later. But sometimes it's about being adaptable, and by being adaptable you can create other opportunities later, so like creative solutions can be discovered from limitations, right? But also like on the other hand could limit you if you come from a scarcity mindset. But it's just, there are certain days and certain times where those things both come into play. And I would say that thankfully, I'm just like around so many women, and so many other crew folks who have so many facets and examples of like what it looks like to be effective as a leader and a collaborator, and I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, that's great that you have a lot of people that demonstrate that in different ways. It sounds like, but
Yeah.
it seems like your background being, second gen, having immigrant parents, also helped you with be some of the skill sets of like being flexible, being adaptable, but having a vision, and then learning to let go of some of that like ideals and the perfectionism of what it is that you were hoping to have. It sounds like.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a big help.
Yeah. So what's the biggest challenge that you've overcome or putting effort into addressing being in this career?
Great question. So, some of the challenge is overcoming this ingrained expectation to be grateful all the time, even when I'm having a hard time. Putting forth this feeling of being confident, but not, and being knowledgeable, but not bossy. And I think the toughest part is sometimes feeling like I can't make mistakes. And so it's a combination of imposter syndrome, immigrant graciousness, and a pressure to succeed. The difference between like a 9 to 5 job and freelance work is that it's day to day. So not only am I performing for the job at hand, but I'm also being assessed for future hireability. Um, so sometimes in this industry, you won't be told that if they didn't like the way you handled something, or you won't get a call back and you might not know why. And sometimes you do get constructive feedback and the opportunity to grow. And it's not a guarantee, though, that you'll like be asked back. So that can be tricky to navigate because I'm like, yeah, I'm flexible, but also like I kind of have to show that I'm confident and not that I'm just going to be pushed around, but also like I have a creative vision, but also like I can work with other people. So it's like, which version are they looking for in this moment? And so it is a lot of pressure because I'm like, there's a sense where I'm like, well, I want to be a team player and help, but also there are aspects where I'm like, yeah, I do feel like I want to stand my ground and be a leader on this thing, but sort of like you pick and choose on like what those things are. But uh in terms of that, like being asked back, it's yeah, it's an interesting landscape because I think back in the day people would tell you. if they didn't like if you did something a certain way. And sometimes people who I think know you really well will also tell you if something you're doing is working or not. From a technical standpoint, you will usually hear it, but if there's something about your personality they don't like, they're not going to tell you that unless they like really know you or really like you. And they'll be like, that was weird that you said that, or like any of those things. So I think part of that is uh, in that aspect of the career. So that's like the general landscape.
Uh,
And my current challenge, I would say now that I'm really working on, is the imposter syndrome around, for me, it would be around predominantly older male crew. And it's been really good for me to address. And I don't know if I would be confronted with it in any other career, at least for me personally, like if I had gone into a different job altogether, if I would be experiencing it. And then so on one hand, I feel really creatively free when I'm around of like diverse genders and backgrounds because like my mental energy is just like sort of freed up to like expand and create and thrive because I'm in like my comfort zone. And then so sometimes depending on like sort of like the vibe in the room, my energy can sort of shift when I'm like in my head worrying about if I'm going to come off some type of way because I'm sticking out like a sore thumb. Like there's just me and maybe one other person somewhere else. But like if I'm like the one like young Asian person in the room around a sea of other like older, very experienced people, sometimes I feel that way. But I do feel like while I love and I appreciate being around folks that I'm like comfortable with, the reality is that a lot of well-funded and higher scale projects are being crewed with older male crew. And if I want to grow personally, like I have to, but I also get to confront that and sort of heal as a person and advance my career. So it's a weird combination of like conforming but also like affecting the vibe in the room. So it's a lot of pressure, a lot of mental gymnastics, and then we can talk about the tools after all that.
yeah.
And the part that comes with being a filmmaker and an operator.
There's just so much that you're balancing all at once, right? Like everything you just shared, I feel like we could go on for days about how to unpack that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
So, were you surprised about the challenges that you are experiencing, or like were these things that you kind of were maybe aware of, like coming into this industry? But how was that for you? Just kind of what you expected of this industry and how it actually is once you're in it.
The only expectation I ever had was just coming into work and like I've only had one 9 to 5 job and it was working at a camera rental house. And even then, like I think the demographic was pretty diverse in like cultural backgrounds, but also age groups. And so I didn't feel that sort of pressure. But I think when I first started freelancing, I kind of came out of the gate working as a technician on like big commercials, and like I think I was really out of my realm because I had gone to film school, I've worked on sets before, and then I had worked and shot like on the side while I was working at the rental house, but not like the scale. Like the money that goes into commercial and the sort of resources is sort of unmatched. It's like nothing like it. Besides monster budget movies, like big movies, right? So this is my first experience and I was like, well, I went to film school, I worked on set, but like this whole experience was different because for these types of commercials I was working on a technical level, I think I was like literally the only like woman technician there, and everyone else were like dudes, and then if they were not dudes my age, they were all like substantially older. And I was just like, oh, like I guess I didn't grow up with a lot of men in general. And I also didn't grow up with a lot like working with a lot of older men and like navigating that. And not that I felt that I was any different, but it's um it's a shift. It's almost like I don't know if this is how like it is to be like in the locker room almost with like a bunch of
Mm.
like a lot of testosterone or male energy. And honestly, like I work with men a lot now. And I think I think it's mostly been fine, but I think there's just like because I didn't grow up that like around this demographic, it was almost like feeling like I had to prove myself, and I was just like, "Oh, maybe it was just I don't know if it's just the status quo and like how we grow up in the society that like we kind of entrust the expertise and experience to go to like to men generally and older men. So I have nothing against that obviously, but I definitely felt like a fish out of water because I
Yeah.
felt like I stuck out so much. Like I felt like a tourist in my job, and it was like, "Oh, like I'm trying to like do this technical thing, and also like it's every minute costs money on a commercial. You don't around." Like, sorry, bleep. And so there was a lot of pressure to like just perform, but also like there were certain things I was still new to in terms of like the etiquette of like what you shouldn't touch on set or like things like that. And like that I was a little bit green to. So even though technically I was very there, I really knew what was going on with the gear. It was just like I needed more, I think, experience under my belt of like what the behavior was interdepartmentally and like how you address issues or like when you mess up, like when do you say it? Like you have to tell them immediately because they
Mhm.
can't move on or they have to reset it and things like that. And like that seems obvious, but like when they're moving like a giant car and something didn't record or something, you have to tell them it didn't record.
Yeah.
You think you would know that, but it's crazy how intimidating when you're like, I felt like this little thing on
Yeah.
like this giant set around these people who knew absolutely like everything about what to do. And I was like, I definitely know what this is, but I don't know how this all works. I'm just here for this. But if this isn't working, what does that mean about me in this giant thing? So it was very easy to focus on myself in those times. But anyway, I don't know if you'll use all this.
Yeah, but that makes sense. I think just, if we're on a job where it's not so live and like everything has to be recorded, if I have an issue with something, I can come back later and be like, okay, let me, you know, talk to myself and like figure out what I want to say. How do I address this? But it sounds like, when you're shooting live and you're recording and it's like a one shot kind of deal, you don't have that luxury, right? So then like the pressure is on to like, how do I say this? How do I address this issue? How do I tell them what happened? And there's just all this that's happening so quickly. And you're like on your literally on
Yeah.
your feet and then also on your feet on your head too of like how to address things.
Yeah, I would say that was definitely like my first rodeo when I first started out. So like I think uh those things came into play, and I think I even though I've gotten a lot more experience now, I feel pretty comfortable in that environment now. But like I think there is still that feeling of imposter syndrome because there's always going to be somebody who knows more than you, or like you feel that uh is more qualified than you, but it's like you have to start
Mhm.
somewhere and you should have every opportunity to try, and like not be afraid to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Obviously you're not trying to make mistakes, but like knowing when to do those things. And I think just the time has helped me, or also now I've just been more vocal if just like, oh, I don't understand, or hey, I just need some clarity on this thing, and just speaking up. And it's just like uh the speaking up part can be really hard because it's like how often is this little Asian woman speaking up to a group of like older cisgender men, you know?
Yeah. And speaking of imposter syndrome too, right? Even just being a second gen, having immigrant parents, and not, if we're not exposed to this industry so much too, being in it already is, we don't feel potentially like represented in that space. And then having anytime we're in a new job and we're doing anything new, there's this level of imposter syndrome because we're breaking out of our comfort zone, which is what you've done and what you continually do as you advance in your career. So it makes sense that this like questioning of us, right, of you, of me, and when we're stepping into new roles is very, very common. And for a lot of adults with immigrant parents too, tying it back to that gratefulness that you're talking about, it's like how do we like really say what we need to say, do what we need to do, while also not causing trouble, so to speak, because there's this layer of always trying to stay under the radar and like be compliant, be helpful, and all of that. Which, if you're trying to do your job as an expert, you've got to do what you got to do. And so it's so many opposing things happening at once that's challenging.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, honestly, I can be pretty hard on myself when I'm going through this kind of thing in my head because I'm at work and I'm like, where am I going? Like, I need to be here right now. Like, why is this person scared, or like why is this person feeling nervous? But I mean, in truth, like everybody feels this way. Um, everybody feels nervous. Like people who have been in this industry for a long time say they still go to work nervous, and it's like beyond the part of like being second gen, you know, and representing all the things and all the things that you're bringing to work. But um sometimes I have to remind myself that it's like I do probably also carry a lot of things as a second generation person, as a person who's a successor of my mother, who is carrying is carrying trauma. I've inherited probably part of her trauma. Um she she might not have been working on film sets, right? But like she's a refugee. She's a Cambodian refugee. She was separated from her family. She narrowly escaped bombs. She was hiding in jungles. She like ran on foot to Thailand to survive, like alone. And then she emigrated to the US alone. She survived a genocide. She survived the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnam War, and she worked really hard and like as a seamstress to support us. And so when I think about that, like she was my first role model stuff. I didn't see all of this, but I did see her working really hard, late nights, weird hours. So I'm like, that's probably where I get that from. And she has like this focus, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is probably where I get that from. And um even though she had no connection to this type of industry, it's crazy because I still feel that there's some aspect of her experience that I've inherited that sort of has me react in a survival mode, um, and carry to with me. Whether it's work or just personally related, like sometimes it's uh, easy to forget that it's still there, and that's important to recognize that I don't maybe have to be so hard on myself, or recognize that like, oh, I'm having this really strong reaction to this thing. Like, where is this coming from? Like, oh, maybe it's just some of this inherited trauma that I'm kind of like, or distrust, you know, of like people. Cause like, I don't know what her experience was personally, like as a kid. So I'm like, maybe I'm inheriting some of that. And so I do try to be a little bit more forgiving about that. And I think even though I can feel, or it can feel like a letdown when I'm not high achieving, and earning when she did all that so that like we could be here. It's still like important to know that like having accountability is important, but like I'm also at the mercy of aspects beyond me, like the state of the government or like the state of the film industry, and like how it's not doing so well right now. So, you know, I have no, if I'm not getting calls, like maybe it's because of
Yeah.
something, but also like not a lot of people are working right now. Also, those things are good to keep in mind, but also like good to kind of take a step back and look outside of myself. Like maybe it's not about me.
Hey, if you found this episode or any other episodes helpful, insightful, relatable so far, I really encourage you to get on my email list as well. This is where you would get actionable tips, relatable tools. You'll be the first to know about any podcast release, any bonuses, or any launches that I have as well. And it's just a space where you can feel connected and have the support and tools that may be beneficial for you as you're embracing how to unlock your fullest potential as an adult with immigrant parents. So go to heyallisonlee.com/email to get on the email list, and I will talk to you there. The link will be in the show notes as well. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, so definitely being kind to yourself and thinking more broadly about other things that could have impacted you, and subconsciously or even unknowingly, right? Just generational trauma, how you see other people cope, and being kind to yourself about all these aspects, that including, right, like the workforce and the job environment, all of that may not be about you, and you're trying to be very intentional about how you look at these things and talk to yourself. And not to overlook it too, but your mom went through a lot of stuff, and it's like I don't even know how to acknowledge that, or recognize that for your mom, for our parents who have been through different types of adventures, is what I was going to say, but it's not an adventure.
And atrocities, yeah.
Yeah, to get to the US. Yeah.
Atrocities and yeah, adventures. No, for sure. And like, you know, when I think about it, is that like my mom has a really dark sense of humor. And we all have our coping mechanisms. And like one of those things for her was that, like having a dark sense of humor. Because if you don't laugh, how do you survive? And a lot of people who have survived a lot of violence and grief sort of take that on as a form of getting through. And she has used that as a tool for sure. And like she still definitely has a lot of things she has to work through being a survivor of something like that. And it's not a small feat, but for us, it definitely gives a lot of pressure. And I know for me, it gives that pressure of like, well, I should do a damn good job then, because it's not like I'm surviving a war. Um, I am just trying to make a living. And sometimes that can feel like a battlefield in here, even though it's like, this is just a job. But you know, you love your job, you love the creativity. At least uh, I like making a living this way, and it's important to kind of remind myself when I'm feeling like I'm fighting a war internally that it's like I'm here to help and this is a good thing. So while those
Mhm.
things are not misplaced, it's like I know where they come from.
Yes, I wonder if that's like a lesson too for our listeners, right? Of like, you could acknowledge what other people have gone through, like our parents and their adversities, but not like have it like be a side by side comparison to what we're experiencing, because then that's not helpful and it's not kind to our own experience. Granted, it's so different and from our parents' experience or whatnot, but just recognizing that they both could be difficult in different ways and not be so hard on ourselves. And with high achievers too, I think they tend to have the bar like really high, and then the bar is always moving. So how can we recognize too that like our version of perfectionism, do we actually meet it already and we're actually moving the bar, versus like we think we're never meeting this bar that's constantly moving without knowing that the bar is moving.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and on that note too, I was wondering for you, what has been helpful for you to work through some of this? I know you've mentioned it, but to kind of like either recap or expand on one or two that you really found helpful. Like, what has helped you navigate through this and be so successful in your career as a camera operator?
Thank you for saying I am successful as a camera operator. I'm still working on that. Thank you. No, it's cool. I've definitely done some fun stuff and I definitely want to be doing more. So that's where that bar keeps moving, right? Yeah, so things that helped for me. You know, finding role models has been really helpful. And whether it's been in the film industry or otherwise, like as a total tangent, whenever I see like an all women band like just jam or like effing kill it, like a music set, like I never know how much I need to see it until I see it. And I'm like, that was so freaking cool. And there's something inspiring from a creative level that like makes me feel like, oh, I can do that. But I don't know if it's like, it feels the same way when I see other like musicians or like other folks. Like I'm inspired, but not like it's something different. There's something about seeing yourself represented. And um sometimes we're not like the same, like we don't have the same cultural backgrounds or anything like that, but like seeing like other women just freaking crush it is very inspiring, and for some reason like really lights something in me and like really makes me want to like do better and like do do something cool too. um Something that also helps is going to therapy. That has helped me a lot. I'm continuing to do that work, and things that I have learned from that has been noticing my own triggers and learning to like soothe that feeling or that voice that comes up. So instead of like judging when I'm like, oh, like I messed up that shot, or like, oh, like I didn't do that thing right. And like I like will audibly say that and nobody else is thinking this, like, or if they are, like fine, like nobody's perfect in the first take or whatever. But sometimes like you can kind of ruminate, at least for me. I don't want to say you because that's my experience. But sometimes I can ruminate on those things and it can really eat at me, or I keep like focusing on those things. And I notice that if I identify the child or the version of myself that's trying to tell me like, oh, like you can't do it, or like you're not good at this thing, or like their imposter syndrome comes up, right? And it's like, oh, I realize it is this version inside myself that's like just trying to protect me, just to say, hey, maybe if you don't do it, then like you won't mess up. But I think the important part in that is like when I can do the extra layer of thinking already in my head is name the child, name the virgin, name the voice, uh Fred, or like, oh, like whatever, like this feeling of anger or like something, naming it and also honoring it and honoring them and saying thank you for warning me, because that's all those things are, at least from my experience, is just by saying like, hey, there's this version or voice in my head that's trying to tell me like, hey, like, I don't think you should do that, or like, I don't want to do it. Like, okay, but like, do it though, because they're just trying to protect you, and just say thank you, I get it, and then do it anyway. So that's been really helpful. um and often in this job, I go from job to job and sometimes forget the good things I do, because I'm always trying to work like, how do I get better? How do I learn this tool better? How do I react to this thing quicker, or like more efficiently, or frame this thing a better like more clearly, or how do I improve on this thing? Um, but sometimes it's important to like log those past resources when those feelings come up of like the negativity, and just reminding myself of those times of like, you know what, I know this is really hard, but remember when you didn't know how to um when you always whipped past this end frame, like now you always know. Isn't that easy now? Like, isn't that so nice? Like, yeah, like now you always know, because you always just follow that thing in the frame and it'll always end there. And that's so easy now, and it's instinctual, but like I didn't always start out that way. Like I had to learn that and practice it. So like things like that, that I try to remember
Yeah.
in the future when I'm learning something really hard.
Yeah.
Just reminding yourself that you practice and you studied and you trained, or like you're doing your best.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's something that helps.
Yeah. So it sounds like it's having role models, really acknowledging, that our brains want to keep us safe. So anytime we're doing anything new, and this is something I experience and my clients experience all the time too, of like there's this fear or this like maybe even potential avoidance to not do it just to like be safe, so to speak. And then also acknowledging the great things that you have been able to do, because it's also easy to look at the mistake or the negative thing versus like acknowledging everything else that we've done and accomplished or put effort into. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I think our listeners will definitely, benefit from just that reminder and also hearing it in a different industry, and maybe it applies to their industry, and just really hearing your experiences, I bet super helpful, because you give me a glimpse of this world that I have no experience in, and it's just really amazing the work and effort that you put into improving yourself professionally, personally, and just really challenging yourself all the time, because I imagine every job is a challenge like a new type of challenge.
Yeah, definitely. I would say too, something that would really help in this is also leaning on your peers. I think also we have a hard time delegating or giving away things to other people, because I think for me, I have this thing of like, oh, like I take this thing on, I feel like I have to fix it, or I have to work on this thing myself, when it's like, at least in my job, like it's a huge set, and there are entire departments dedicated to helping achieve what you guys are trying to do. And so I don't know if you've mentioned this before, of like when you were working in clinics and stuff like that, and how like it felt weird to kind of like involve other people in what you were doing, and things like that. So I wonder if it would relate. But um I know for me, like that's definitely something I have an issue working with, delegating, and like confiding in others. And like I know for me, I end up feeling like most intimidated by folks who really know what they're doing, obviously. And so I do find that if I spend less energy trying to prove I belong somewhere in a group, versus like confiding in their expertise, like it's healing for both of us. And then it feels like I'm not just like some diversity hire sometimes, that I can contribute my perspective, and like someone who knows more can impart their knowledge, and then we can like create something really cool together. And I think sometimes being a leader isn't just about purely leading, but it's about like bringing people into the fold for like that common good. And so like if you're not working with people and like trying to bring people together, then like you kind of don't get anywhere, like being perfect in your own lane. Like you have to be uncomfortable all the time if you want to grow. So hopefully this resonates for everyone and not just the film industry, but
Yeah.
like everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Things that you're touching on, I think, can apply to other industries as well. But, with the unique experience of being in the film industry.
There she is. We love
Yep,
Sophie.
that's my
Doggy.
dog. So, this whole conversation that we had, it just reminds me a lot of like, how can we have goals, be flexible, and also be okay with not having things work out exactly as we planned, but knowing that that is still the best work and good work that we're doing, and focusing on that instead of like the imperfections or challenges that we have. Is there anything else that you think, you want to leave our listeners with, or that you find helpful, just to kind of, end on that note?
I would say if there's anything you're working through, I would and you haven't seen a therapist yet and you feel like you're considering it, I would recommend it. I think it's helped me a lot, and I think I felt a lot of resistance because it can be awkward. But the thing is, I think I would call again back to being uncomfortable, that you kind of don't, you can end up limiting yourself if you kind of hold on to idea of like what's awkward or what's going to help me and what's not going to help me. I think giving yourself that room to make mistakes will actually make you better. And it's the opposite of feeling like you're going to improve when you make mistakes, but you have to. You're a baby. You don't like start walking immediately, like you fall a lot. And so, like, it's a very obvious analogy, but it's true. And unfortunately, we as adults make it more complicated as we get older.
Mhm.
Like, no, now I'm an adult. I cannot make mistakes. And it's like, I remind myself all the time, like, it's all right. Like, just do it again because you have to, or you don't grow. So go to therapy if you haven't. I would recommend it a lot. See this lady, she knows what she's talking about.
I mean, as a mental health provider, also separate from the coaching stuff, yes, definitely. And I go to my own therapy as well. It's super beneficial because when you're inside the bottle, it's hard to read the label, right? It's kind of hard to see what's going on and, acknowledge all those things at the same time, because so many things are happening for us at the same time. So it's great to get a different perspective and practice that vulnerability and just saying what we're thinking and feeling, which could be hard sometimes when we're worried about, how it makes us appear and all of that. So in a safe space, that could be very, very helpful. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I really appreciate you sharing your history about your mom, just the challenges that you've overcome and are continually working on, because we as humans are never not going to have anything that we're working on. So that's also kind of the what you were sharing about, kids and babies, like learning to grow, learning to walk. It's a continual thing, right? Just because we learn to do one thing doesn't mean another thing is going to be super easy for us. We're always working on ourselves and improving. So I appreciate your vulnerability and you sharing. If people are interested in working with you or finding more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Chris Oeurn on Instagram. That's ChrisOeurn on Instagram. Or you can go to my website, and that's framingup.com.
Yeah, it's a great name. I love that name too. Thank you for joining us and sharing your story, things that you've gone through, things you've overcome to our listeners. I really appreciate it. And I know that it will benefit a lot of people who may be experiencing this as well and may not be talking about this or hear about other people talking about this. So thank you so much, Chris, for being on today.
Thank you, Allison. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for imparting your wisdom and your expertise in light of my industry and my work.
Yeah, I love hearing about your work. So I hope our listeners found this enjoyable as well. I'm always like, oh, this is like insider scoop that I never get of like how it is to be in the film industry. Always very interesting.
I wish it was more juicy. I wish it was.
And I really have to agree that about the athlete thing, because the cameras you hold, and you'll see it in our promo, in our, social media stuff, and it's a really big camera. And oh my gosh, I don't know how you're balancing literally physical weight and emotional, mental weight at the same time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shout out to the departments.
All right. Well, thank you again, Chris, for joining us. Check her out on Instagram or her website if you are interested in learning more about her, and we'll talk to you next time. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. I appreciate you being here. Just as a reminder, all information on this is intended to be informational and educational only. Although I am a licensed therapist, I am not your therapist. If you are looking for any medical or mental health services, please reach out to providers local to your area and seek out information that is specific for you. This information is not intended to replace any medical or mental health services that you may benefit from. And I hope that you enjoyed the information that was provided on the show today, and I'll see you on the next episode.